Hey, we're here talking with Jason Blum. Now, Jason, you've been the producer on some massive, massive horror films. In fact, a lot of massive films, full stop. Paranormal Activity, Get Out, The Purge, Split, and now Halloween. How does it feel coming into something that is essentially a horror icon? Like, you've been responsible for a lot of new IP and new takes on horror, but what is it like going back to something that is iconic?
Well, it was a big challenge, and I loved the notion that there was the greatest horror movie of all time, Halloween, right, was made, and then there were 9 subsequent movies made, none of which were too good. Some better than others, but they were kind of lacking. And so I loved the challenge of we have a very specific way we make movies at Blumhouse, and could we kind of impose our system on this IP that's been around for so long and see if we could actually make a good Halloween? So the short answer to your question is I love a challenge, and Halloween was a challenge.
Okay, because the way that you make films is really fascinating. Like, you've got a strict budget that says $5 million, no more. How do you change that for something like Halloween? Do you say, okay, well, we need a little more for this? And does that then bring problems? Like, were you dealing with other companies and?
Well, more money always brings problems for sure. But our rule is $5 million for original, $10 million for sequel.
Right.
So Purge 2, 3, 4, and 5, Insidious 2, 3, 4, 5 are all in the 10 zone. The original's in the 5 zone. So we stuck to that with Halloween. Even though it's our first Halloween, it is a sequel. It's a proven IP. So at $10 million, it's still a very, very low budget. So we didn't break that rule. But the answer to your second question is the biggest challenge for us is that we're used to choosing a filmmaker and then empowering the filmmaker to make the creative choices, and we give the filmmaker final cut, and they have final say. Now that makes the filmmaker ask us what they ask, get our advice all the way through. In this case, you couldn't do that because their rights are so spread out. They're different people, have different controls. So that was the hardest part for us, was to navigate our system through a setup that made it challenging for our system to work, but I think we managed to do it.
Yeah, well, so your system is very much you're in control. This time you're having to deal with also another horror icon. You're dealing with John Carpenter. So what's that like for you? Is it like you go to the mountain and ask for advice? Or
yes, it's very much like that. I mean, John Carpenter, we didn't want to do the movie without John Carpenter. I think one of the reasons many of the sequels were not so good is because John wasn't involved, except for the second one. And my caveat, the only thing that I said I wouldn't do the movie without was having John's involvement. So, but that was exactly how we treated him. We treated him as the overlord, and at crucial moments along the way, we would go to him and get his blessing. And when we didn't have his blessing, we wouldn't go forward.
Right. And so he was on set at different points, or was it more a kind of consultancy type?
He was on set, but he wasn't on set. He was on set, for 2 or 3 days, not for most of the time. What it really was involved in bigger decisions. Should we hire David and Danny? Did you like the conceit that David and Danny came up that this Halloween was going to take place 40 years after the first one and ignore the other 9? Do you want Jamie Lee Curtis back? Those big decisions he was very involved in, and he blessed.
They're big calls too.
They were very big calls. Particularly the concept of ignoring the other 9 movies was a very risky thing. Yeah.
Or what to ignore.
Well, they ignored everything. So
but they don't though. Like
they nod.
Yeah.
They're winks.
Yeah.
They're winks. But on a purely storytelling level, it's what happened in the first movie, where those characters are 40 years later. They tip their hat to the other 9 movies, but it's not involved in the mythology of the storytelling. And that was totally David and Danny, and I think they were very clever about it. And I'm thrilled that they came up with this conceit that they did.
See, Danny McBride is a name that you wouldn't necessarily think, oh, okay, we're going to put this on a Halloween film.
Well, I would, but yes, the world wouldn't.
So, okay, why is that? Why?
Because you have to have, I shouldn't say you have to have, horror movies are generally much more successful when you have comedy baked into them. You can't keep someone on the edge of their seats for 95 minutes. You don't have that enough adrenaline. You gotta have them relax. You gotta have them laugh. And then when they're relaxed, and then when they're laughing, and then when they're kind of off guard, that's when you come in and scare them. And that makes the scares much, much more effective. So for me, and there's no one funnier, there are very few people as funny as Danny McBride. And so for me, it made a lot of sense. Lee Wanell, who's one of our great, we've done 6 movies, and he has a big sense of humor. humor and puts a lot of funny stuff in our Insidious movies and other movies that we've done
And
together.
even the concept of the Purge is at its heart kind of slightly terrifyingly
Absurd.
funny.
Yeah, terrifyingly funny. It's absurd.
And
yeah.
now we're moving into TV with that.
Yeah,
Which
exactly.
is ballsy as hell, man.
Yeah, yeah.
So I guess one last question about Blumhouse as a whole. It sits in an interesting place within the industry. That you are low budget.
Low budget.
But we're talking about budgets of hundreds of millions, and now we're saying, okay, 5.
Right.
But it comes from a history of things like Hammer and things like that. So did you have any reverence for that? Did you go, I want to be a part of that pantheon, the horror backstory?
It's more reverence for, I grew up from independent film, so it's more reverence from, I just always think that lower budgets have led to oftentimes more interesting filmmaking. So rather than saying I wanted to be part of Hammer, I wanted to be part of the tradition of independent film in film history, but somehow marry that. What I hate is independent film distribution because it's broken and it's awful. And so what I wanted to do was marry independent filmmaking to studio distribution. And on the movie side, that's what Blumhouse is.
Awesome. I would love to talk an awful lot more about that, but we've run out of time. Thank you
All
so
right,
much, Jason.
Thank you.
Cheers. Thank you.
Nice to meet you. Nice to talk to you.